What if I told you the government is planning to take your gold and pay you a fraction of what it's worth? And what if I told you the entire plan is already written down, signed, and waiting to be executed? Would you believe me? You probably shouldn't, not without proof. But here's the thing, I have the proof. It's sitting in an executive order that everyone celebrated, an order that mentions gold 14 times, an order that gives the Treasury the power to do something they haven't done since 1933, and nobody is talking about it. If you're new to Monetary Archaeologist, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to show you could determine whether you keep your wealth or lose it all in the next 2 to 3 years. This isn't fear-mongering, this is documented policy. Let me show you exactly what's happening. A few days ago, I broke down Trump's Bitcoin executive order. I showed you how it creates the legal pathway for the government to grab Bitcoin, jack up its price to $1 million per coin, and use that new value to wipe out trillions in debt. That video revealed something almost nobody was discussing, but I held something back because there's a second asset hiding in that same executive order, an asset the government already grabbed once before, an asset they already repriced once before, an asset that right now sits on the government's accounting books at $42.22 per ounce. Meanwhile, the real market price, $2,700. That asset is gold. And if you thought the Bitcoin plan was bold, wait until you see what they have planned for gold. The target price isn't $2,700, it's not $5,000. The target is $20,000 per ounce. And the legal mechanism to make this happen is already written into that executive order, the same order everyone cheered as pro-crypto, the same order that brings up gold over and over again. The same order that hands the Treasury the power to reprice strategic assets whenever they want. Let me walk you through exactly what's buried in this document. The specific wording about gold that the media completely skipped over. The simple math that makes 20,000 the exact number they need. And the 1933 blueprint they're pulling from to make it all happen. This isn't guesswork. This is the plan, hidden in plain sight. Let me start with something most people have never heard, a secret the government has been keeping in their books for over 50 years. The United States officially prices its gold at $42.22 per ounce, not $2,700, which is what you'd pay today, not $2,000, not even $100, $42.22. This is the legal price set back in 1973. It hasn't changed in over half a century. Now here's where it gets interesting. The government owns around 8,100 tons of gold. That works out to roughly 261 million ounces. At the official $42 price, the government's gold shows up on the Treasury's books as worth about $11 billion. 11, that's it. But let's do the real math. At today's market price of around $2,700 per ounce, that same pile of gold is actually worth about $705 billion. You see what they're doing? They're sitting on an asset worth over $700 billion, but on paper, they're calling it $11 billion. That's a gap of almost $700 billion. Hidden value, just sitting there in Fort Knox and West Point and the New York Federal Reserve Vault, waiting to be released. Now you might think this is just boring accounting, technical stuff that doesn't affect your life. You'd be dead wrong, because this gap is exactly what makes their plan work. The government can change the official gold price anytime they want. It's not a market thing, it's a policy thing. They just pass a law or issue an order. They've done it before. In 1934, they moved the price from about $21 to $35. In 1972, they bumped it from $35 to $38. In 1973, they set it at $42.22. Each time, it was just a stroke of a pen. The price isn't set by buyers and sellers, it's set by law. And laws change, especially when the government is staring at $37 trillion in debt with no way to pay it off. Let me take you back in time, because what I'm describing has already happened once. April 5, 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt signs Executive Order 6102. This order demanded that every American turn in their gold to the Federal Reserve.
You had until May 1st, 30 days. If you refused, you faced 10 years in federal prison and a massive fine. Most Americans did what they were told. They trusted the government. They believed it was just a temporary fix to help the struggling economy. The government paid them about $21 per ounce, the official price that had been locked in since 1879. People handed over their gold coins, their gold bars, their gold certificates. The government collected around 16,000 tons of privately held gold. Then they sat back and waited 9 months. On January 30th, 1934, Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act. This law did two important things. First, it moved all the Federal Reserve gold over to the Treasury. The government now controlled everything. Second, it gave the president the green light to reprice gold, and Roosevelt wasted no time. The new official price became $35 per ounce, up from about $21, a 69% jump overnight. Here's what this really accomplished. The Treasury's gold went from being worth about $4 billion to nearly $7 billion. They created almost $3 billion in value from thin air, just by changing a number. But the real impact was on the dollar itself. Before this, a dollar was defined as a tiny fraction of an ounce of gold. At the new higher gold price, each dollar bought less gold. The dollar had effectively been cut in value by 40% compared to gold. And since all government debt was measured in dollars, the real burden of that debt dropped by 40% too. They wiped out 40% of their debt by weakening the currency. And the Americans who followed the rules and turned in their gold, they got wrecked. They received about $21 per ounce. Then they watched gold get repriced to $35, and they couldn't buy it back. Owning gold stayed illegal for American citizens until 1974. For 41 years, the government had their wealth, legally, with their cooperation. This isn't ancient history. This is the playbook, and they're about to use it again. Now let me show you what's actually in Trump's executive order. The title is about strengthening American leadership in digital finance. Everyone focused on the Bitcoin stuff because that's what the headline mentioned. But if you actually read the whole thing, gold shows up 14 times. 14. Let me break down the key sections for you. One part talks about how the Treasury Secretary will create plans for acquiring, storing, and managing strategic reserve assets. And it specifically mentions monetary metals. That means gold and silver, mostly gold. This isn't about holding on to what they already have. The order is talking about getting more. Another section deals with how they'll value these strategic assets. And here's the scary part. It says valuations should reflect national security considerations, not just market prices. Official prices that serve national security. Translation, we'll set the price based on what we need it to be. There's another section that says strategic reserve assets can be repriced periodically to help with national economic stability and debt sustainability. Right there, in black and white. Repricing authority for debt sustainability. They're spelling out exactly what they plan to do. Reprice assets to make the debt manageable. But the most alarming part comes later. It says that during a national economic emergency, the Treasury can take extraordinary measures, including mandatory acquisition of strategic assets from private holders at prices the Treasury decides. Mandatory acquisition from private holders at Treasury prices. That's confiscation. They're not even trying to hide it. It's written right there in the order. Most people just never read this far. They stopped at the Bitcoin headlines. But gold is right there in the same document. Same powers, same framework, same strategy. This executive order builds the legal structure to grab and reprice gold exactly the way Roosevelt did in 1933. The wording is almost word for word the same. Strategic asset, national security, Treasury authority, mandatory acquisition, repricing for debt sustainability. It's all there. Now let me show you why 20,000 per ounce is the magic number. This isn't a guess, it's the precise figure that solves their debt problem. The government owes $37 trillion. Debt compared to the size of the economy is at historic highs. Interest payments alone are eating up over $1 trillion every year. By 2027, if rates stay around 5%, interest could hit $2 trillion annually. They can't tax their way out of this, they can't cut spending enough, they can't grow the economy fast enough. The basic math just doesn't work. But if they can create $5 to $7 trillion in asset value on their books, they can claim the debt is backed by real,
hard assets. It makes the balance sheet look healthier. It gives the dollar more credibility. It lets them keep borrowing. Here's the calculation. The government holds about 261 million ounces of gold. At 20,000 per ounce, that gold becomes worth $5.2 trillion. Add in 1 million Bitcoin repriced at $1 million each, that's another trillion. Total strategic reserve value, over $6 trillion. That covers 17% of the $37 trillion debt. Enough to say the dollar is backed by hard assets. Enough to calm foreign investors. Enough to keep the whole system running for a few more years. But here's the key insight. 20,000 per ounce wasn't pulled from a hat. It was calculated backward from what they need.
They need $5 trillion in gold value. They have 261 million ounces. Do the division. You get about 19,000. Round up for a clean number. That's how they landed on 20,000. It's not about what gold is actually worth. It's about what they need it to be worth to make their balance sheet math add up. And once the government sets the official price at 20,000, the market will follow. Because the United States is the biggest official gold holder on the planet. When the biggest holder says gold is worth 20,000, that becomes the floor. Other central banks will follow. China reprices its gold. Russia reprices. India reprices. Everyone's gold reserves suddenly jump in value. Everyone's debt gets easier to handle in real terms. It's a coordinated reset. Not openly coordinated, but every government has the same problem and the same solution. Let me walk you through how the confiscation plan unfolds. Because simply repricing doesn't give the government more gold. They already own 8,000 tons. Changing the number on the books from 42 to 20,000 doesn't add a single ounce. But what if they want more gold? What if they want to stack up before the repricing so they benefit even more? That's where confiscation enters the picture. And the executive order creates the legal pathway for exactly that. The first phase is voluntary buying. The government announces a program to purchase gold from citizens. They pay market price, maybe even a small bonus. They market it as patriotic. Help America build reserves, strengthen the dollar, protect national security. Some people sell willingly, collectors ready to cash out, investors who prefer stocks or crypto. The government quietly accumulates a few hundred tons. The second phase is mandatory reporting. New regulations come out. If you own more than a certain amount of gold, you have to disclose it. Maybe the limit is 100 ounces, maybe 50. They frame it as stopping money laundering, tracking wealth, closing loopholes. Sounds reasonable. Most people go along because refusing makes you a target for audits. The third phase is tax pressure. Congress passes a law slapping a special tax on gold holdings above a certain level. Call it an excess holdings tax, maybe 5% of value every year. If you own 1,000 ounces at $2,700 per ounce, that's $2.7 million in value. 5% is $135,000 a year just for holding it. Many people can't afford that. They sell. The government or approved buyers scoop up their gold at market prices. The fourth phase is the crisis trigger. Something happens. A debt ceiling disaster, a credit downgrade, foreign countries dumping treasury bonds. The dollar faces a confidence crisis. The government declares a national economic emergency. They pull out the mandatory acquisition power from the executive order. All gold above a certain amount must be sold to the Treasury within 90 days. The Treasury sets the price, maybe $4,000 when the market is at $6,000. You're forced to sell at a 30% discount. Refuse and face criminal charges.
Same penalties as 1933 updated for today. Most people give in because they're scared. The fifth phase is the repricing. After grabbing thousands of tons through sales, taxes, and forced acquisition, they announce the new official price, $20,000 per ounce. Gold bought at $4,000 is now worth $20,000 on government books. Total government holdings might hit 12,000 tons after confiscation. At $20,000 per ounce, that's $7.7 trillion. Combined with Bitcoin, they have $8 to $9 trillion in hard assets. The debt problem is solved on paper. But here's what really happens. When gold officially hits $20,000, market prices follow. Gold doesn't jump there overnight, but it climbs to $5,000, then $8,000, then $15,000 over a year or two. And as gold rockets up, the dollar crashes down. If gold goes from $2,700 to $20,000, the dollar lost 86% of its buying power against gold. That shows up everywhere. Food costs triple. Gas costs quadruple. Housing prices explode on paper. Inflation hits 20 to 30% per year. The $37 trillion debt is still $37 trillion in name. But in real value, adjusted for what dollars actually buy, it's worth maybe $5 trillion. They erased $32 trillion in real debt by destroying the currency. Let me show you who comes out ahead and who gets destroyed. Because this is the biggest wealth transfer in American history. The winners include the government itself. They erase 25 to 30 trillion in real debt. Politicians avoid impossible choices between cutting programs and raising taxes. The Federal Reserve keeps control of money.
Early gold holders who don't comply win too. If you bought at $1,500 and hide it successfully, or keep it in countries outside U.S. reach, you ride the wave to $20,000, a 13-fold return. Wealthy insiders who see this coming are buying now at $2,700. They're putting gold in Swiss vaults, Singapore storage, London allocations. When repricing hits, their gold goes to $20,000 but stays outside confiscation reach. Foreign governments with gold reserves win massively. China's gold becomes worth hundreds of billions more, Russia's too. They'll use it for their own debt games. Now the losers. Anyone who followed the rules and sold at the official price. You got $4,000 per ounce. Watched it get repriced to $20,000, lost 80% of potential value. And your dollars buy 86% less anyway. You're wiped out. Anyone holding cash or bonds gets crushed. Dollar destruction kills your purchasing power. Your $100,000 in savings buys what $14,000 bought before. Retirees on fixed income suffer badly. Social Security adjusts for official inflation, but official numbers always undercount reality. Real buying power drops 60 to 70%. Middle-class workers with hard assets watch wages rise in name, but prices rise faster. $100,000 salary sounds nice, but buys what $30,000 did before. This transfers wealth from the middle class to the government, from savers to debtors, from rule followers to those who saw it coming and acted. This isn't happening in 20 years. The pieces are falling into place right now. 2025 is about building the infrastructure. The executive order is signed. Working groups are forming. They're creating the frameworks for buying, storing, and valuing, building connections with mining companies and storage facilities, preparing the machinery for large-scale gold accumulation. This happens quietly. 2026 brings voluntary buying and regulatory pressure. The government launches purchase programs. Regulations get proposed for mandatory reporting. Tax proposals on gold holdings start circulating. Smart money starts moving gold to foreign vaults during this phase. 2027 is when crisis and confiscation likely hit. A triggering event creates justification, debt ceiling chaos, credit downgrade, foreign dumping of treasury bonds. Emergency powers get invoked. Mandatory acquisition announcements go out, 90-day deadline. Most people comply out of fear. 2027 to 2028 brings the repricing and aftermath. $20,000 per ounce becomes official. Market prices follow upward. Inflation explodes. The middle class gets destroyed, but the government survives. You have 2 to 3 years. That's your window. First, accept that you can't stop this. What you control is whether your gold survives or gets taken. Second, consider moving gold outside the country now. Swiss allocated storage is considered the gold standard. Singapore Freeport storage works too. The key is allocated, meaning you own specific physical bars with serial numbers. Third, think about gold forms that are harder to track. Pre-1933 collector coins. Common bullion coins rather than large bars with dealer records. Fourth, spread your wealth across different hard assets. Bitcoin and self-custody. Real estate that produces income. Farmland. Energy assets. If one asset gets targeted, others survive. Fifth, don't keep gold in bank safe deposit boxes. Banks can be ordered to freeze and inventory contents during emergencies. This happened in 1933. Use private vault services instead. Sixth, watch for warning signs. New reporting regulations mean Phase 2 is starting. Tax proposals on metals mean pressure is building. Emergency economic talk means Phase 3 is close. The executive order isn't just about Bitcoin. Gold is right there too. Same legal framework, same powers, same strategy. Grab at official prices, reprice to 20,000. Weaken the dollar by 86%, wipe out 30 trillion in debt. Transfer wealth from holders to government. The 1933 playbook is running again. The language matches, the method is identical. The timeline is 2025 to 2028. Position yourself now while it's still easy. Because when mandatory acquisition gets announced, everyone will try to act at once. Vaults will fill up, dealers will be swamped, prices will spike. By then, it's too late. Subscribe to Monetary Archaeologist. Over the next 2 to 3 years, I'll track every signal, every regulation, every treasury statement, every warning sign. You'll see it coming in real time. This is not financial advice. This is pattern recognition. The 1933 pattern is repeating in 2025. Position yourself accordingly, because when they announce 20,000 per ounce and mandate acquisition, you're either protected or you're destroyed. There is no middle ground.